sorry, but. Okay, good evening and welcome to the Templeton Community Service District Board of Directors meeting. Today is Tuesday, October 18th, 2022. May we have a roll call, please?
Director English,
Present.
Cornish,
Here.
Tardini,
Here.
Logan,
Here.
and Peter.
Here.
Okay, if you would, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. And for the record, the board did meet on October 4th and had a closed session discussion, and there is no reportable action coming out of that closed session meeting. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss the general manager's performance appraisal. With that order of business, I think we only have one item on the agenda as new business. And with public comment, we don't have any public on the Zoom call. And for our audience here, Claude Carson is here. And you may address the board on any topic this evening that's not on tonight's agenda within the jurisdiction of the board. The board cannot take action on any item, but we can direct staff to look into an item, or the board may ask questions and ask that the item be placed on a future agenda. So with that, do you have any items that you would like to address with the board this evening?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. Consent agenda, we have 3 items on this evening's consent agenda. The first item is the adoption of the regular meeting minutes of October 4th, 2022. There's also the treasurer's report for the month in August 2022. And there is an EPA resolution number 23-2022 and an MOU approval. And this is for the board to consider participation in an employee assistance program, as well as authorizing the execution of the memorandum of understanding for the same. Would any board member like to pull any item on the consent agenda? Okay.
I'll move it.
Well, do we have any questions for any items? Okay, members of the public, any questions on the consent agenda items? Okay.
I'll move it. Consent agenda.
Okay, I'll second that approval. So we have a motion made by Director Peterson to approve the consent agenda items A, B, and C, seconded by myself, Director Logan. Can we have a roll call, please?
Directors Peterson,
Yes.
Logan,
Aye.
English,
Yes.
Cardonish,
Aye.
and Tardini.
Yes. Okay, that motion passes 5-0. Our next item of business is the discussion of the appointment of members of the public to the district's internal committees. And this will be that the board discuss and provide direction to staff regarding the possibility of adding members of the public to the standing committees of the district, which we discussed at our last meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our general manager to provide some background information for the board's consideration as well.
Thank you much. So as you may recall, at your last board meeting, likely due to some interest expressed from members of the public to serve on the board, the suggestion was made that we ought to look at expanding our committees so that those members could maybe serve on the committees. That would serve a couple of purposes, but the discussion at the last meeting was maybe that keeps people engaged and can provide a kind of a foundation or a spot to that generate interest in serving on the board, and so we don't go through an issue like we did where there wasn't enough persons, wasn't enough interest to serve on the board during the normal election nomination period. So I did do some research on this topic since your last board meeting. There are a couple of, I do have a couple of special districts in our county that have these citizens on committees. Although I hadn't really talked to those districts in specifics prior to this coming up. So what I learned was while both Los Osos and Cambria have citizens on committees, those committees really work quite differently than the way we've used committees historically here, in the recent past anyways. I would call those committees more like citizens advisory committees. There is a board member appointed to each one, in some cases a second board member, but that second board member really serves as an alternate to the first board member. The committees are primarily members of the public, not members of the board. They meet monthly. So there are like more than 5 citizens on each one. And so in those cases, that seems to be different than at least the way I understood the discussion of the last board meeting. So it didn't appear to be necessarily something we could just take and apply here. To do a little bit of legal review too, like what are the implications for this? How would we go about implementing it, et cetera. So I've kind of just queued up a few questions for you, things that I think we need some confirmation on or decisions on, and then this item can be brought back in the form of a resolution adopting some changes to policy to actually put this in place, depending on how you want to go about it. I did take a stab at kind of drafting red lines to your bylaws committee section. Those, of course, will probably require further changes depending on the outcome of this discussion tonight. But I kind of took a stab at that to see how it would fold in play. What if, assuming that we're talking about the same committees, the internal, what we used to call committees of the board or the standing committees, those would be the same 4, and there'd be some minor changes to those committees, not necessarily a big overhaul of the structure. So that's kind of what I took a stab at. But I think the questions for the board, and stop me anytime, this is meant to be very casual, very interactive here, is the first, I think there should be some discussion about is the intent to only appoint members of the public who express interest who are residents of the district, and that there's, I think, 2 options. There's obviously at least 2 options. If they're of voting age and residents of the district, then it would essentially be kind of a direct pathway to the board. I mean, you wouldn't appoint somebody who couldn't later serve on the board in that case. But you might find that maybe there's interest to serve on the committee from persons who might reside outside of the TCSD boundaries, but consider themselves from Templeton, participate in our programs, for example, or get any of the services here. You might find interest, and I don't know this, but might find interest of persons who have a business in the community but live in Paso Robles or somewhere else, but still, want to participate. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. There's not, obviously, you can, but this should be discussed now ahead of time before you have applications and before you have a process.
So I can see if the objective of us having this public representative is for the purpose of having a pathway to eventually at some point having some interest to serve on the board, they would have to be Templeton TSD or a TCSD resident to serve on the board. So it makes sense to me that the committee would also have that same requirements.
I would offer a different opinion, because I think if it would limit the number of people who would be involved in our committees, where I think Jeff made a good point, where there might be a local businessman who lives in Paso or Tascadero, a businesswoman who would like to be on one of our boards. And it would not be a pathway to being on a board, but it would be community input still, somebody who's, involved in the community here, who is part of the Main Street, part of the chamber, or maybe on the hospital, or, lives in a Tascadero with their kids, or highly involved in our rec department or something like that. I just think the more involvement we have from community at large, that's good. If they want a direct path to the board, then the only way they can get there is if they live in the area. Live within the TCSD area. So I'm more open than being so restrictive.
Any other thoughts?
For me, the prime motivating factor was several motivating factors. One is just to get more input into our business. And we have lots of committee meetings where there's nobody here but the committee members, so it'd be good. I see Park and Rec as a beneficiary of this. I see fire department as a beneficiary of this, where you got people who know and would be engaged. So I think it broadens the perspective on our committees. But for me, it was primarily a avenue for folks to be engaged and then possibly serve on the board. And I think that not opposed to it being broader than that, but for me, it was a vehicle for folks to learn about the mechanics of what we do and be engaged, provide recommendations to the board, and then possibly serve on this board in the future. So I mean, that for me, that was a big motivating factor, but doesn't have to necessarily preclude others outside the boundaries. But my original thought was that it would be for TCSD folks, no residents.
Peterson?
I guess I don't mind, I guess, having it broader than residents. My original thought, like Jeff was saying, was that it would just be for residents. I think at the very beginning, I would probably prefer that. But again, I would not be opposed to broadening it. I'd like to get it started just to see what we get. So anyway, that's kind of my feeling.
And the public is not, I mean, the public already has access to these committees, so they
Yeah.
can already attend. So there's nothing that prevents them, or a business owner that lives elsewhere, they can still attend.
Question,
so-
how many, are we limiting, I don't remember reading, are we limiting the number of people who would be on each standing?
We haven't come to
Haven't
that
covered it.
discussion yet, but that is one of the questions that
The
will
other
be
thing we
asked.
could do is if, let's, I mean, just hypothetical, if we say, oh, it's only one person, then you give preference to somebody who lives in the PCSD service area over an outside person.
Yeah,
You know, that you could write in a preference as
well,
given
we'll get to that. I think the first question is really, you know, do they have to live within the district and be of age? So to serve on the board, you have to live within the district and be of age. So that's the question is, do we restrict it to within the district and age? Or do we expand it, as Jeff was indicating, to go beyond that, to open it up to anyone that's interested? So,
A question there. A committee member, Jeff, do they have to be of age?
They would not, I think it's a separate, I didn't tee that one up, but I think it's we can get to that.
Because way back when, David's son was a board member of the school district. And they had, and I thought that was a great idea. And he was better than you, by the way, but anyway, yeah, he did. I told him that before, that's, anyway,
No,
I
I-
always thought that was a good idea for us, but because the rules are different as they pertain to CSD versus the school district, it kind of.
Yeah, I think you could.
So I think it would be kind of neat to have maybe some high school kids, that
Yeah.
if you could get them, to come on some of the committees. So
I
I would question the age.
I think you could decide that separately and maybe there's a reason to be. You know, a person who's 16 or 17 will eventually become registered, old enough to register to vote and serve. So although it's not common, it's kind of to have.
But they'd move out of Temple.
Possible.
okay, so going back to the public, do we limit it to people within the public? And Director Fardanis, you have not weighed in on this.
I mean, I prefer to limit it to the residents of Templeton. I mean, after all, we're elected by the residents as well, and I think it you know, when you live in Templeton, you maybe look at the issues differently than someone that lives in Paso Robles or Atascadero. And I think that could make things complicated. I would like to see the you know, be an organic committee where it's all within Templeton. And but as far as age, I don't mind having somebody that's 16, 17 or whatever. I think that's good to get their point of view. But I don't know if I wanna, I just wanna concentrate on residents of Templeton and for us to work on that.
Director Giardini, do you have an additional comment?
No, I just
Oh.
had the question about, or the comment about that. How many people were going to be on the committee and could we write in the bylaws a preference would be given to those that live within TCSD's boundaries over those who lived outside of it? Because I mean, there are like, there's a lot, you know, a lot of my friends live in the school district, but not in TCSD's district. So a lot of what we do impacts them, you know, for our services. And so it's, you know, it's just more hopefully reaching a broader community involvement.
Any other comments? Members of the public, would you like to comment on this particular item?
I just have a question. Does there have to be a blanket policy that applies to all committees, or can it be addressed committee by committee? For instance, the rec department kind of services a whole plethora of people that are outside of Templeton who are paying for the services, should maybe be allowed a voice. And, you know, maybe the water service and the fire department serve different constituents. So maybe instead of a blanket policy, address each major service to see if maybe it's applies to different constituents.
I would think that that would be within the scope of what we're doing here.
Yeah,
I mean, we could carve it out to say for Park and Rec. 'Cause
You could, just keep in mind on Parks and Recreation, those programs all also have advisory bodies, like there's a soccer advisory board, there's a softball advisory board. So there are some ways, and we don't, matter of fact, we're not, the board is not involved in the appointment of those members, but there are persons who are on those committees that are not residing in Templeton today. They're not a committee that reports to you, they're more guidance for the department on running the programs, so it's a little different, it's, you know, but nonetheless, that option does, so we do that now, but not with the committee of the board. But you could certainly do that. We could have a separate one for each of these programs, or state specifically, that Parks and Recreation, in this case, our Parks, Recreation and Refuse.
Yeah, that was
Would,
gonna say.
you know,
that's
could have a
not-
broader.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's not just Parks and Rec, it's refuge
Refuge,
as well.
yeah, so it's not just Park and Rec. Although, yeah, I mean, I think people are more likely to serve on these committees if they do live in the area, if they've got some skin in the game, so to speak. And with Park and Rec, I would think that, yes, that would be incentive enough for people outside of our boundaries to still want to participate, but Refuge, I'm not sure they would be interested in that, but I think it's a way of getting more people, but I like the idea of possibly carving it out. Anyway, anyone would like to make a motion or any other comments? Okay,
Well, if you're gonna,
We're gonna vote on
so
each
what
of
we
these items,
need to
or-
vote on each item, on each one, because there's a list of questions, so I think we need to.
Yeah, I don't think we need a formal vote, but we do need direction so that we can prepare a draft of something that comes back to you for formal consideration. So if there's a consensus on a concept, that's something we can work towards.
So,
I mean, actually, so let me just, before we get going on this, I was gonna ask you. So do these boards, these members, do we have to have members from the public for these committees to be able to do their business? Like,
No,
to have these-
we haven't got there yet, but I think there's a ways to structure them so that maybe the one committee there's nobody interested or nobody's appointed to it, and the committee would function the way it is now, and maybe some committees would have more than others or whatever. You know, I was envisioning this we're sort of like just stepping into it, and so, you know, probably what you do twenty twenty-three may or may not be what ends up happening 5 years down the road when this has got some legs.
Director English?
Yeah, one of the things I think maybe a conversation we need to have before we jump into some of the specifics is, what are we creating? I mean, I think, what I would hesitate to see would be creating a new body that's gonna require, regular meetings and minutes and things that we're not doing now. So my thought originally was just do we have opportunities now to fold people into the programs that we have that don't create a lot of additional work for staff? So, and that's original thought was that, let's just add some people to the committees that we have so that we're not creating a new independent committee that, it's something like Cambria or Los Osos does. It just minimizes the impacts on staff. And so, I would hesitate, I wouldn't really support anything that would create a new workload for staff.
Yeah, I don't think, as our general manager was describing with Cambria is, they have more of an advisory committee that meets on a regular basis that does result in additional work on the part of staff. And I think we're trying to avoid that. I think our objective is just trying to get the community more engaged. So the purpose of the committees would not necessarily change. I don't think that's the objective. Our goal is just getting more community involvement and exposure in hopes that it could spark interest in moving forward and serving on the board. Yes, Director Giardini.
Sorry, turn my phone down. Just a comment, when looking at policy title here, we have the standing committees and then we have the organizations. So like, if somebody gets added to Templeton Area Advisory Group, that's not gonna make any sense. So
We're only looking at the internals.
We're only talking
We're not
about.
talking about the external committees,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought we might be talking about both.
just the
Okay,
internal.
just the internal ones.
Director Peterson?
I think as we go further into this, I sort of agree with what Director English was saying, but as I read through what you had written, Jeff, it's gonna be more complicated because these people are gonna have to file Form 700. They're gonna have to go through all of the nonsense, which I think is stupid, but we need to do that. And so I think I would almost think that we would have to, and I think adding a little staff work would be well worth it if we get the people to come, but I think in the long run, we're gonna have to somehow, the staff's gonna have to do a little bit more work, definitely with all the forums and everything.
Yeah, I think there's I think, maybe as you look at these, we don't have to totally reach consensus until we do them all, because maybe after you fill this out, you'll have a better sense. But, no, I think there's a little, just having, if the committees are structured like they are now, and we just call them as needed, it's maybe minimally more work. Obviously there'll be some onboarding, there'll be some, some orientation of the public. I think my biggest on that topic about regular meetings or whatnot is the board, the members of the public. So we have Kalu, which is wonderful, but we don't envision her being a member of the public in just a couple months. So we need those folks who are going to serve on these committees theoretically don't necessarily have a lot of traction with the district on a week by week or month by month basis. And so when we appoint them to a committee, is just attending 3 or 4 committee meetings over the course of a year sufficient to feel like they're making a contribution and getting their feet wet and really understanding the district? Or are they gonna have higher expectations? Further, right now, or for many years, the committee meetings are not on a set schedule. We don't do it. They're as needed. We contact you, we figure out your availability, we schedule a meeting, we post the agenda, etc. I think that would work for probably most of the people who are going to express opinion or express interest in the committees. It won't work though it may not work for others who really would need something more structured. In other words, they say, hey, I've got to be able to, I've got to know when the committee meetings are, so I can take off work, I can plan for it, or plan childcare or whatever. Now, we don't. Most committee meetings are called, you know, a week in advance or something like that, sometimes more. But they're treated as special meetings because they're not on a set schedule. If, you know, in order to broaden the interest or the availability of those members of the public to serve on these committees, that may or may not be an ideal arrangement, although it is what we've done. And I just wanted to have some more discussion on that because I wasn't certain about where the board was going. You know, I think during COVID, we had fewer meetings, but you know, pre-COVID, most of these committees met 3, 4, 5 times a year, you know, 3, 4, or 5, rarely more than that, times a year on an as needed basis. If you think that's enough, we can start out that way and see if it works. You know, you can revisit, this isn't like set in stone, but what I didn't want to do is underestimate the commitment. If you say, if Cambridge today said, no, the committees have to meet like every other month in order to have a sufficient level of engagement, then I'd say, well, that's kind of like double the amount of committee meetings. And so then there's more, there's more support that's necessary. I think it's going to be more anyways, but it would be, you know, noticeably more if there's 6 committee meetings for each committee during the course of the year.
Carrie.
Well, from my perspective, I don't think that the goal was to change the frequency of the meetings or how the meetings are scheduled. I think it's a matter of just adding individuals to engage them in the committees to get greater exposure. So I agree that there's probably some orientation that needs to occur. That's going to be, I think, minimal. And so I think, and the benefit of having these folks serve, I think outweighs, you know, the staff time as well, because it is minimal. So I don't see that as changing as much as, you know, just defining what is the role of these individuals so that it doesn't morph into an advisory committee or something different than what it is today. So any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would kind of disagree with that. I think our main goal is to get people to show up. And we can sit here all day, and we have for all of us that have been on the board. How do we get people in those seats over there? And so we're all kind of talking right now, like as soon as we do this, they're going to come flooding in, and that's not the case.
No, it's
I
not.
think that we, at best, we maybe should have 1 or 2 meetings a year that are scheduled. We're going to have them anyway. And so if you have 2 meetings in January, 2 meetings in February, and then 6 months down the road, we could take care of our normal business and still, if people are all working and they have to have certain times, then we could look into that. I think the first bite of the apple, we should be as kind of broad as we can be, and we can always change it later. But again, I think we need to keep in the back of our mind, the idea is to fill those seats, and we won't have Khalid sitting over there. She'll be sitting up here looking at empty seats, and we can't get people here. I'm kind of questioning what the process. To me, we need to talk about how to get people to even come in and apply. So,
Yeah.
Well, anyway, and I think the easier you make it for those people, the better it would be. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
So you're suggesting that we not just have these, because right now I believe the bylaw says that each committee will meet a minimum of annually. You're suggesting that we have them at least scheduled?
No, I'm suggesting that 1 or 2 meetings a year should be scheduled, maybe 2, because most of the committee meetings meet 4 times a year. You know, give or take 1 or 2. And so I'm saying 2 of those meetings, I think, could be scheduled very easily for each committee. Not do them in the same month, but maybe do, again, 2 of them in February, 2 of them in March, and then 6 months down, you have, and if you need to call a special meeting in between, then fine. Just a suggestion. I'm not saying we should put it in writing right now, but
Yeah, I think whatever you land on, that's how we'll communicate to the public, say, if we're gonna keep the committees the way they are now, I would write committee meetings are scheduled as needed, typically held in the afternoons, we work with the committee members to determine their schedule, their availability, and then the meeting would be scheduled. And that would be part of the public information that goes out to get, applicants for this role. So that's why I wanted direction early on, so we could start that, and of course you could change you could mix this up down the road if it doesn't work well.
Director English.
Yeah, I kind of agree with both of you in parts. I think certainly if you want to keep people engaged, you got to feed them with something. And so if we just have a meeting or two a year, they're not going to be engaged. So I think there's certainly, just by adding people to the committees, it's going to take on a different relevance. And I think there is going to be more of an interest in bringing that group together to get, we're going to be more conscious of that. And I think probably quarterly is something that might be, when we meet a couple times a year, that's what we do now, 3 or 4 times a year. You don't necessarily need to be scheduled, but I think that certainly needs to be something in the forefront of the general manager, is to bring some meat and put it on the plate, a few times a year, just to keep people engaged. So I think it'll probably happen somewhat organically, because you're going to have people who are interested and want to sit down. But I think we do need to be conscientious of that, and I don't know if that translates to a policy, but I think the intent would be my recommendation to do meet at least 4 times a year. So you have, something of substance for folks to bite into.
Director Bogdanish, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. If we are gonna get the public involved, you gotta get them involved, and if it's only once or twice if you only have them involved once or twice a year, I don't think that's gonna be a good example for them becoming a board member. They're just gonna say, this is nothing, so why bother? So I think we gotta show that we are our business, what we're doing, how we're going about, how we're making these decisions, and then get them excited and get them involved. That's our ultimate goal. So the only challenge that I see, if we try to set specific dates, like for us, for the facility committee, it was nice for us to be able to meet that certain, at that last meeting when there was something, what's happening with the filtration. So we needed to meet. That was, so I guess we couldn't have done that if we are, if we had already set at another time. So that could be a challenge. But we do, at least I reckon, I agree that we do need to meet at least 4 times a year if we want to get the public involved. So.
The only one, Wayne, I think we're on administration finance. I think we only meet twice a year.
no, we 3 times, I think.
I mean, so the admin and finance, every committee has some specific tasks, like, for example, the admin and finance committee needs to help prepare the budget, reviews the items with the auditors. Those are kind of, May and September, but then there could be other times as well that are called. I can't recall. I mean, I can pull up your
Well, I know
schedule
the
of the past.
facilities committee, we've only met twice in 1 year.
This year,
last
yeah.
year. Or this year. So there are the frequency of the meetings are not all consistent. And I understand that we're trying to keep people engaged, but hopefully they would attend this meeting. Because I hate to see that we're having meetings scheduled for the purpose of having a meeting when there's not sufficient agenda topics to discuss.
Well, I would think it should only be the first year and see what happens. I think if you get people, if you get 2 people, that's 8 people to coming in, I think 1 meeting of the first year would be just, what's this committee do? And go through the
There's
process.
an orientation.
An
process.
orientation process, and then look at this again at the end of the year and see how it's worked or how it's not worked, and then change from there. But again, I reiterate, I think our goal is to get people to show up. And I don't think they'll show up if, well, you're gonna be on this committee and we don't know when it's gonna be, but we'll let you know, and it's only gonna be twice a year. I can't see that working, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think if in order for it to work, I'm just kind of glancing at our prior agendas. We've had some committees, like looking at fire and emergency management, that met 5 times a year in certain years. Other committees have met less frequently, 2 or 3 times a year. And let's see, Parks and Recreation 3 times in 2022 and 3 times in 2021, twice in 2020, twice in 19. I mean, I guess I think there's some value. It is, as long as the board is looking to recruit people who have some flexibility or understands it. At one, I guess the thing I want to point out is our committee meetings are typically held during business hours now. And so that's going to limit to a certain degree who can serve on the committee unless you want to change that, right? There's going to be certain folks who work out of town, who are working or not able to take time off to attend the committee meetings or join a committee. And therefore we should communicate that ahead of time when we meet. There's some value in our ability to be able to call the meetings as needed because we can then be more responsive. You know, I wouldn't, for example, the Parks Recreation Refuse, one of the things they've typically done is taking kind of an in-depth look at refuse costs and proposed fee changes and kind of and those come when they come. They come from Mid-State Solid Waste when they prepare a rate case. I can't predict when they're gonna when that's gonna be available. So or when those needs are gonna come up. So, and we're not gonna be able to schedule, for example, the administration and finance meeting with the auditors until the auditors are scheduled, right? Until they're scheduled to be in the district. So, to a large degree, I think having some ability to be nimble, I think we could say something like committees, typically meet 4 times a year. That'd be maybe a little more than we have. That might mean one committee might meet 3 times and one committee might meet 4, 5 or 6. I don't know. Or maybe you say a minimum of 4 times. We probably add a few committee meetings. That's something we could do. If they had to be on a set schedule, I think it'd be a little tougher because I think some of those meetings would be pretty light and not very meaningful. Because maybe the items that we wanted to bring to the committee just weren't ready at that time. For example, the last committee meeting we held a couple weeks ago was a facilities committee meeting. And there were some timely items on that. I mean, we do our annual stormwater prevention report. That's not really ready until September. We happen to have the filtration, and then we put other items in the agenda to make it more meaningful. So, anyways, I'm good with supporting about 4 a year. I think that's a little more than we do now, but I think you're right. I mean, I believe that in order to get some value out of these people, these citizens, we need to be able to have something meaningful for them to do.
I was just thinking, why don't we just maybe try initially, at least the first couple of years, just limit this public participation only to a couple of committees. What gets people motivated or excited, like, I would say fire department, fire emergency, and the rec department, and maybe possibly finance. Just limit it to those 2 or 3, and then just see how it goes. And then we learn from them, and then we could then expand as then see how, as it comes up. Because to be honest, I don't know if we're gonna be able to get more than 4 or 5 people interested in committees anyway. So why don't we just focus on the areas that we think it's important to have public participation, more important, like, fire department and, as I said, the parks and rec, and then see how it goes from there.
You still throw it out there and say, some people get excited about audits. Wayne, I tell you,
Yeah,
I
no, I
get
mean,
all worked up about an audit. I don't get it.
Well,
There may be people who do, but
Jerry want to be on the budget committee?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would prefer opening it up because I think that we're probably gonna get the same individuals who may want to serve on more than one committee. Because I think we'll be lucky to get just a handful of people. And they may be inclined to say, well, I'm interested in finance and admin and I have an interest in wastewater.
I was envisioning developing like a simple application that had, you know, the name, a little background information, and then it'd have like, okay, I'm interested, and they would just check the box at whatever committee they would be willing to serve on. And maybe we get 6 applications in, or maybe 3 or whatever, and if nobody's interested in serving on admin and finance, then there isn't anybody to appoint to that, to that
And can
one.
they be on more than one committee?
I guess that's an issue we should try to
I
resolve.
think we should allow them more than one, because again, if we're also looking at this potentially being a pathway
Right.
to
then
having
it should-
somebody
The
be
more
able
they
to
know.
hit the ground running if they so choose to be on the board, it helps. So I don't think we should restrict it.
So I
Unless
think,
there's more than the number that we say can serve on that, then I think it would be an issue.
Love to have that problem.
Yeah.
Probably
It would be a good problem to have.
so I like what General Manager Brooks just said, if we could turn that into a motion as far as, you know, having the committees be flexible like they are now, with maybe a projected minimum 3, most likely 4 meetings a year. You know, you fill out an application, you can be on potentially more than 1 meeting, and start with that. Because there just seemed to be some consensus, like Naveed said, that let's get it started and see how it goes. And we can tweak it as it goes along.
Yeah, I would think, open it up to everybody. If we only get three people, then we could limit it to whatever committee.
Well, I would think it would be whatever their interest is.
Right,
And if they all want the same committee, so be it.
so be it.
Well, and I kind of like your idea that maybe someone wants to serve on 2 committees. Originally, I wasn't thinking of that, but you know what, maybe that's a way for them to have further engaged, because I'm worried that even 3 or 4 isn't enough per year, but maybe if somebody's really gung ho
Right.
and they get on 2 committees, now they're here 6 times a year, 6 or 8, and they feel like they're really getting some traction, and they, you know, so maybe, and I'm not suggesting that that's what you would do.
Well, I
but-
think we should allow for it. I don't know that that will happen, but we should allow for it in hopes that it would.
Well, hopefully too, if they get in a committee, when it comes to the full board, they'll show up to the board meetings.
I mean, us as board members, we are appointed to 2 different boards, so we could let the individuals know that, yeah.
Well, more than that, but yeah.
Yeah, you could, you guys could do 2, and that way that increases the experience, you know, just let them know. You know, you could apply for, or we recommend being involved in 2 committees. That's our recommendation. See what they say.
Let me see if I can have this right. So I think there's consensus to kind of promote this as sign up or apply, figure out which committees, make a request at which committees you want to serve on. You're not necessarily limited. It'll depend on who applies, I take it. We'll say 3 to 5 committee meetings a year as called during the business day, as you know, as we do now. I think the issues really then come down to do you want the appointment of the committees to be something that the board president has that obligation, or has that ability, as is kind of today, although I know they don't appoint, the board president doesn't appoint you to the board, but she now does appoint you to your respective committees based on your requests, of course. So for simplicity, I kind of left that the way it is, but you could develop something more complicated, like the board president could make some recommendation, or based on the board's ratification or something, and we can, if you're concerned about that, but I think initially it's probably not a controversial thing.
Yeah, it is.
Not a
I
controversial-
personally, I would be against having the board president do that. Nothing against Debbie,
It's
but
not
I,
me, it's
I
not me, it's the board president. I just hold the position today. It's the role. of the
I
board
remember 8, 10 years ago when, I mean, it was really bad on the board. And it was 3-2, and every vote was 3-2. And that's what prompted the grand jury report and all that. I just think it's to have the president whoever that may be. I wouldn't want to be in that position either, so to say that, okay, I want all of these people. And I'm pointing
But
at
today, the board president does assign
the
the
committee.
board members
Well, that's
to the
fine.
committees.
That's
So I
fine.
think the
That's
question
not
is-
like getting people from the
So,
public come
so-
in and saying, I, as the board president, am gonna appoint them to the committee without the rest of the board even knowing who they
so
are.
you think it should go to the full board, is what you're recommending?
I would recommend ratification by the full board.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a simple process, put
Yeah.
on the consent agenda.
Yeah, it would- the board, the-
Not
and then-
controversial, so
Yeah.
somebody applies and we vote on it through
Yeah.
a consent item and.
Okay.
Simple.
so the board president would essentially make that
It would be an agenda item.
right, but
It
but
would
you
be-
would, it would not be an open, I mean, could be discussed, but the idea is the board president's gonna make a series of recommendations up for the board to ratify, right? Is that-
I mean,
No,
you
I
could
think-
you could have a committee that looks at them and then bring it to the full board, but
No,
that would
I
be.
think it's gonna be up to staff to take those
No.
applications. I envision it based on the comments is the staff would take in those applications and present to the full board the applications that were received and the people, what the requests were. And the board would then ratify, what was requested. So if there's, 5 people going for finance and admin, this board would have to, and maybe we say that there's a limit of 3 public participants, then this board would have to make a decision on who would be those 3 people. If there's 5 applicants, if we're so lucky. So that's
The
what
board
I'm
would
hearing.
appoint.
The
It
board
would
would
not be,
appoint.
it would not be a consent calendar item, it would be a discussion.
No, it would be a discussion.
I have a question. Way back when, there was at least 2 blue ribbon committees that I can think of that were appointed by the board. What's the difference from those blue ribbon committees and what we're talking about now?
Like, if the blue ribbon committees were established as ad hoc committees, the board president has the right to establish the committee and develop a method for getting people on those committees. Even in your bylaws today, so we had, for example, an ad hoc committee on.
Park and Rec.
Park and Rec,
Rec, fire emergency,
fire emergencies, but
for a specific task.
the board president said we're gonna have a blue ribbon committee, but the board president didn't appoint the people to it.
You come up with whatever method.
The fact is, as I recall, the one that I was on, each board member, whatever, so.
Yeah, you can make this as complicated as you want. For example, in our, you could have every board member have the right to make an appointment, you know.
Focus, Wayne.
So, I mean, there are, as an example, like planning commissions, those are, I mean, those bodies operate somewhat more independently from the board, but in some cities, there's like a rotation, and every time there's a vacancy on the planning commission, the next board member gets to make that appointment. It's like their appointment. It's a more individual. It's not, so there, you can make this as complicated as you'd like. I think we probably don't have a lot of, and we're not gonna have reams of applications day one. So we can start out sort of simple, and if this becomes a bigger issue, you can make changes to this process. I just wanted to come up with a way to phrase it in the policy, and so if the consensus is, we want the full board to make the appointment, then that's what we'll do.
And that's what I'm hearing is that the full board is wanting to make that appointment. Okay. So,
And then I think the next thing is really how many members of the public per committee do you view as kind of the max? And that's, let's say the max in the short term, because, again, down the road, you can change this, but in 2023, in the next couple of years, I had a short discussion with Board President Logan, and she said, well, no more than, I wasn't thinking no more than 3, and so that's what I kind of included in my draft work, but you can.
That's a 2 personally.
Do you want to do an
We're gonna be
odd
lucky if we get 3.
number? I mean,
Like if
It's-
want.
I mean, so if we say no more than 3, that doesn't mean there's going to be 3. It means there might be 0, 1, 2, or 3.
To each committee you're talking
Right,
about.
yes.
I think it
Comments?
has to be an odd number so that if they have to vote on something, which you've already got 2 members. So I don't know, 3 or 5.
It would put 5 votes per committee.
Well, and again, this is written, so it doesn't have to be, it's no more than 3.
Yeah,
So we
but,
may not have,
but ultimately it would be a maximum of,
yeah, a maximum of 5.
Yeah, no more, okay, I buy no more than 3.
Right.
But the committee doesn't have to be,
Because if people want to participate, they can still come.
Fair.
They're just not a voting member then.
But
I mean,
even this. are
and
they
the committee
voting
meeting doesn't have to
wait,
be
wait, wait, wait.
making decisions, so.
I mean, even with this, are they gonna be voting member?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think you want to have them as a voting member. Now, remember that the committees really, any substantive decisions are really kind of, it's more of, we're gonna recommend that it comes before the full board. So if you think about all our existing committees, it's really decisions are made as to whether or not to bring it to this body for any real votes.
Yeah, the committees don't have any legislative authority. I mean, very minor exceptions. We took formal votes for like AB 361 compliance and those kind of things. Otherwise, it's information update. Are we on the right direction? Or do we have a recommendation to the board to proceed with a certain action? So I mean, I'll be more conscious of that as we have members of the public, but I don't think the committees, I'm not envisioning them taking on any sort of new authority. They can't direct, you
Yeah, so
know.
there won't be any voting.
Well,
Yeah, I
if
mean,
there's
there
a,
won't be
if there's a
any voting
vote
to
to
worry about.
recommend to present something to the board, for example, I mean,
Right.
then yes, and I think the intent is to make them feel like they're part of that body.
No, this was only
So,
whether it mattered, whether there's
Well,
3 or.
Pam and I never agree on anything, and it always comes back that we're split on
Yeah.
the decision that comes from the board. So.
So I mean,
That's
I don't
pretty
think,
true.
yeah, so I don't really think it matters whether it's 3 or 2, just. I mean, we could put down no more than 3, and to me, the more the merrier, so.
okay, so you
Okay,
have direction?
So,
then?
yeah, I just want to come, there's 2 more items, and then we'll finish on the one that we struggled with earlier, but so one of the items is that our legal counsels advised that we should have, if we're gonna do this, we should amend our conflict of code policy to require appointed committee members who are at that point members of the public to be included in the local conflict of interest. That means they need to be Form 700 filers, they have to observe the conflict of interest issues. I mean, I don't think this are gonna be common, but keep in mind, I think the filing of Form 700 is, that's something that we're gonna have to include in our materials. It is a disclosure and it may turn some people off. I mean, they may not be willing to do so.
Do we have to do that?
I think it means that if we don't do that, we're gonna be limited to what can come before the committee. The committee can't at that point make recommendations about specific purchases because you might be looking at a particular technology or
And again,
or
if we're,
item.
Can't we
if we're looking
pretend
at
it
the
doesn't happen?
people potentially, hopefully pursuing, serving on this board, they would be required to fill out that Form 700. And it is once a year. It's not that difficult to do.
It's a pain in the ass. Don't.
I don't think it's, I don't look at it.
I
as-
agree with Pam, first
Yeah.
time.
I don't think it's it's because it's difficult, because we can actually work with them to fill it out and
Yeah.
take care of the technical issues. It's more like, okay, now you're invading I've got to disclose my stock holdings, I've got to disclose my real estate holdings. I mean, into some people who are foreign to government, that may be uncomfortable, that may be something that turns them off, even though very few people might ever look at it.
But then this may not be the role for them to serve on. So I
Well,
think,
you're
it
right,
is a
because-
requirement of all of us. So I
You're
think
right.
it's appropriate that, this be requested.
Right, because if they're gonna advance onto the
Yeah.
board, they're gonna have to do it, so.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, well then we're back to, I
So-
think residency and age. Right, maybe residency first, and I think, because you could allow applicants who are both residents and non-residents and state that there's a preference to residency, but that wouldn't preclude the board from appointing a non-resident. But if you really want this to be residents, then I think you should not, if that's really the goal, then you're probably gonna feel obligated to appoint whoever applies, and you're gonna have a hard time turning somebody down because they're a non-resident, if there's an opening on the committee.
But, okay, so if they fill out the Form 700, it says on there for which jurisdiction and things like that, so Do they have?
Well,
to be
they're
there?
still a committee member for a Templeton CSD committee, so they'd be serving under our jurisdiction, even if they don't live here.
Why don't we start with the easy one, the age, because I think we're all.
Okay.
16-year-olds and above,
How old did you say?
16.
Yeah. that's about
You
that.
remember that far back?
No,
Okay,
Okay, good, 16. Yeah, that means in 2 years, they're theoretically of voting age and could run for the board.
I'd be in support of limiting this to TCSD residents to start. If we find that we don't get enough folks and we need to amend it over time, then open it up. But I think the intent was to have a feeder program for the board, and I would support limiting to TCSD residents.
Me too.
Me too.
I would agree with that.
All right, so let me just recap, let me know if you have any other issues on it. 16 years old and older, resident of TCSD, 3 to 5 meetings per year, scheduled as needed, based on their availability. They they were required to file a Form 700. The appointment will be made by the board of directors, in January annually, I think that's kind of what it sounds like. I had previously, written that they wouldn't be limited to, even though the appointments for a year at a time, they can stay on the same committee. Many of you have expressed interest to stay on the same committee, so I assume that was the case.
And I would also suggest that we take any applicants during the course of the year. So if anyone should move into the area and suddenly has an interest, that we would take them at any time.
And then, so if we get an application, do you want that brought before the board for appointment?
I thought, we don't meet the first Tuesday in January because it's right after the holidays.
Yeah.
Typically.
Don't you appoint everybody, then you we
We do it at the second meeting in January is when the appointment of the board.
do we? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it says by your second meeting in January.
I was thinking it was in February. Okay.
So I would probably then put the committee appointments, the members of the public appointments on the same agenda or at the same time. And we would have like a window that would open up, not a window, because I mean, we would push for applicants like at the end of the year, like in December and early January. But like you said, we could continue to accept applications
I
throughout the
would
course of
think
the
we
year.
should do it in November. The sooner the better. Because the holidays, if you do it in December, people are busy in December.
We could, this
the holidays.
won't be authorized that quickly, but.
Yeah.
In subsequent years.
Yeah,
we can do it
okay.
earlier.
subsequent years, what do you mean?
2024, 2025, in future, this isn't available yet, right? We have to,
We have to still work out the details and.
you'll need to
change the
amend
bylaws.
will you adopt a resolution to enable this?
I would think it should be in December because that's when we have new board members possible. And if we do November, they're not gonna be.
No, I'm saying we should make out a public notice in November
Advertising.
Oh, okay.
to advertise
Okay,
it,
okay.
to get that advertisement, because if you do it in December, people are busy with the holidays.
I do it earlier, right?
Yeah, we could come up with, like, again, this could be an application online. We could just kind of get the word out early on in the year that you're interested in serving your community. These committees meet, they're available, and just submit this by with a deadline, and then that would be considered in January. And then, of course, if one came in later, you can still consider it.
Kalud, how did you find out about the vacancy on the board? Was it through the press release or Templeton Crowd? Do you know how the other 3 people found out about it?
I'm not sure, I think Jerry found out about it, Jerry Gass, found out about it from, I think, one of the publications that you, posted.
I think all 3, I think the other ones we heard from came from the news release.
Yeah,
Because we sent that through all of our e-bill customers, and it ran in the Atascadero News. One of them said specifically they read it in the Atascadero or Paso Robles News.
I have a question. Have we or should we consider any compensation for their time and effort? I mean, if we want to encourage people to participate,
yeah.
I think that may help. I mean, I'm not, maybe $50 a meeting or something like that, something, but that still shows that, their time is at least a little bit valuable. If they're taking off time from work and things like that.
Like
Or
jury
they
duty
have-
pay,
Pardon
jury duty pay.
me? Something, yeah,
You could bake cookies.
you know, we just thought, I mean, just.
Yeah, I hadn't, I mean, I, for whatever reason, I assume this would be an unpaid thing. If I can explore, if you want to provide compensation, what we'd have to do to make that possible. It would be more than just amending our, this policy, but I think that, typically these committees are unpaid. Like, you know, planning commissioners don't receive, they receive training opportunities and things of that nature, but are advisory committees.
Yeah, I don't think. we
Yeah,
should.
I think maybe perhaps we can look at that. I think we need to go with what we have right now would be my recommendation. And see what kind of response we get. And maybe we do need something to entice people, we'll see. But I think that would
had
have a
coffee
budget
today.
impact. Yeah, coffees and cookies.
Hey, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
We haven't let public, you know, this conversation.
Pardon me?
We haven't let the public. in.
Yes, we have. Yeah, because
Way early.
Kaloo, yeah. Yeah. We have. Any other comments?
Just that.
Kaloo, do you have any other comments on this item from the public?
I guess kind of to flip the frequency of the meetings, you may actually entice other people to come who can't do frequent meetings because of work and life responsibilities, and maybe the 1 to 2 meetings a year might welcome kind of a more diverse pool of applicants.
The only problem I see is that the meetings normally take place during the day, and if they can't take place during the day, because of somebody's work constraints, I'm not sure that they could ever participate from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
The only concern I have is having staff have additional meetings in the evening. Because I think right now it's,
And if you have to go out and see the water sewer plant and.
yeah, if you have to, yeah, because we have toured the water, the
Yeah.
Give
wastewater
them a
treatment
flashlight.
plant. But you don't want to do it at night. As it is, I walk a straight path to make sure I'm not close to the edge of those ponds. But I think we need to kind of explore what kind of response do we get? I think we're gonna have to tweak this as we go. You know, hopefully we'll get some response, but I think we'll have to see, is that gonna be a barrier to people participating? Is, you know, lack of compensation, you know, is that gonna be a barrier? So I think we're gonna have to see, what does it take to get people to kind of come into these meetings and get involved?
I mean, I think one thing to keep in mind when we talk about the commitment or whatever is, you know, and this was a lousy agenda to look at, because it really was pretty light reading. But I expect our board meetings to be more formal, more prepared materials, more preparation on your part. The committees, sometimes there's no staff reports, there might be just some example items that there's less preparation that a committee member needs to do for a committee meeting, because they're less formal and they aren't making final decisions typically. So you know, it's the meeting time, they're an hour or two. You know, some of them are shorter than others, but they're, you know, we've typically not had to have very long committee meetings. I think if the goal is to get more engagement, having them appointed to the committees is more likely to get them to come than to just simply be an audience member, because you give them a real voice, even though audience members at our committee meetings would have real voices. And perhaps that creates an obligation or more of a commitment on the member, on the part of the public. And I think it could be an effective training ground or a pathway to the board. I think it would be unusual to have to pay folks for this kind of role.
I agree.
So have we given you enough direction?
Let me go through this real quickly, make sure let me know if I've got it wrong. Okay, 16 years old or older, resident of TCSD, 3 to 5 meetings a year as needed, held during the workday typically. And again, ours are typically afternoons when possible. And especially if we're gonna have younger people, we'll have to work around their availability. We're gonna amend the conflict of interest code, that'll come back to you. the appointment will be made by the board as a whole. There'll be an application that's always available, but we're gonna push for it toward the end of the year for January appointments to the committees. There's not a restriction of serving just 1 year, and committee members or members of the public can serve on more than one committee at the board's pleasure. Do I have, is that sufficient?
Yep.
Did that
Yep.
cover the things that you think are necessary? Okay, we'll so then what I'll plan on doing is coming back, I'll make some further amendments to the bylaw section. I think that that's gonna be sufficient. We'll prepare a resolution that'll have some findings in it that would adopt the revisions to your bylaws. These will no longer be committees of the board. They'll just be committees of the district or district committees. There will be standing committees. There'll be another resolution to amend the conflict of interest code to make that clear, and we'll prepare some application materials that will go online, and that would then be pushed out once these are adopted, so you can begin this really in 2023. I just wanted to keep in, we haven't covered everything. Some of the, there are going to be some issues that maybe we haven't anticipated. I hope not a lot of them, but I know, we may end up having to come up with some specific policies or something to deal with issues in the future. I wanted to treat this kind of nimble. I don't think we're going to be overrun with applicants. I mean, I think you are looking primarily as an opportunity to take those 3 people who showed some interest and say, okay, here's a spot for you now. And to kind of go from there, not expecting, to be overrun with other interest. And then maybe as time goes on, people enjoy it, or they recruit other folks. I can see people, I can see the fire, because that's kind of more of a hands-on. I mean, it's big red equipment, people like it, and being something that folks are interested in, and maybe some of the committees are not as fascinating, at least initially, but I like the idea of, particularly for someone who's like one of the 3 that were here, serving on more than one committee, that seems like it would give them enough continuity that they would really feel like a part of the district, instead of just our committee, and instead of just one committee.
Well, and I could see some of the Measure A folks on that committee, oversight, the Measure A oversight committee, some of those folks may want to serve on the fire and emergency committee. So that might be of interest as well. So
You might have somebody who's interested in becoming a firefighter serving on that committee. The other thing is, my understanding is the colleges are going to are getting rid of the SAT scores, and they're looking more towards the kids' involvements in the communities. So that means then there would be more interest in our teenagers, our high schoolers being involved in activities.
Yeah, I think we could recruit you through, if there's some specific interest in really trying to get maybe a student through like through the Templeton High School leadership class or something of that nature. I think that's how they've generally got the board member, the high school board member, programs like that. I don't, offhand, I'm not sure how this is, may not appeal to them, but I like the idea. I like the idea of being able to permit those kinds of permit younger folks to serve.
okay. Good enough. Ready to move on then
Yeah, so-
to our general manager's update.
I sent out an update on Saturday morning to you. I think there any questions. Otherwise, I did want to say that we learned through that the governor has announced that he plans on ending the COVID state emergency in February. That will end our ability to do the AB 361 resolutions, and we'll have to more formally comply with the Brown Act. There was another bill that was passed this year that had some other mechanisms for providing remote meetings. I'll need to familiarize myself with that before February's time, but my intent was to continue to bring to you AB 361 compliance resolutions as long as you could, at least give you that flexibility, even though for the last, say, 4 meetings or so, I think Elizabeth, everyone's been here.
Will that exclude the public from calling in, or is it just the
No.
board members? Just the board
You
members?
can always take, yeah, you'll continue, you'll still be able to take, public participation remotely.
Can you see them all up there?
Hope.
Well, it's similar to the county meetings. You have to be in person in order to vote. So, but it still allows for the convenience of our public to be able to, Zoom the call.
Yeah, because that's a big benefit.
Okay, do you want to speak about today? Meet and greet?
I'd be happy to. So we did, CSDA hosted, introductory meeting with Congressman, Panetta. His district, with redistricting, the district that Panetta currently represents is gonna expand southward into northern San Luis Obispo County. So CSDA organized a meeting with special, and invited special districts from our from this area to participate. It was very much an introductory kind of a thing, kind of a meet and greet. It was, we did host it here. Both board members, Jardini and board president Logan attended from TCSD Board of Directors. We had one board member from Cambria and their general manager. There was the incoming fire chief from San Miguel and general manager from Heritage Ranch. There were a number of other special districts invited, but I didn't anticipate their attendance. I think Lynn CSD and Ground Squirrel Hollow and some of the Independence Ranch, some of the ones that we don't see much of and these kind of things. And this was pretty last minute and come together, I think last Thursday or something. So that was about an hour. And I thought Congressman Panetta was quite engaged and was trying to learn what he could about what we do and learn about the area. He is running for election, I guess re-election, but it's a new congressional district. And so this area, right now we're in Salud Carvajal's district, but that will end with the, I think in January when they're sworn in, whoever that ends up being, whether it's Panetta or one of his, I don't actually know much about that race. Panetta or whoever
There's
else.
one other
Another.
candidate that's running.
So whomever wins that seat will represent us in Panetta's case, he's trying to get a running start.
Okay, any questions from the board? Any questions from you, Khalid?
No.
Okay. All right, in terms of activities reports, there is a utilities report. There's also a water resource advisory committee report as well. Oh no, it's utilities here. Oh, those are committee reports, sorry. Facilities committee meeting. Which Director Fardanish, do you want to comment on that at all? No, that's not your committee. Yes. Facilities.
made
We
the
did give an
comment, yeah,
update at the
yeah.
last meeting verbally,
Yes.
but this is the
Yes,
minutes
that's
of
the
the
record,
meeting.
but yeah, if anyone has any questions.
So I don't know if there's any questions that anyone has.
So we'll just, if I could comment just quickly,
Sure.
what we're trying to do now on, so just so everybody is reminded, all committee meetings, if they're held in this room, the minutes are still very short, right? They're just action minutes, but there's a recording of it, a video recording posted to our website through YouTube. That meeting was held not in this room, but we did an audio recording and we were able to eventually get that on YouTube as well. So
How
there's.
did that work?
um,
Because we were actually touring the wastewater treatment.
I thought you
plant.
could hear
Yeah,
better than
it sounded-
expected.
It sounded pretty good.
Did
It
it?
just took some time to actually be able to get it from the phone to the computer to.
Okay.
It was like a 50 megabyte file. So,
But it has the text with it and stuff.
yeah, it did the
Okay.
conversion. So it's there. So anyways, if there's ever a committee report that you want to learn more about, you can always go to our website and watch either the video Zoom or in this case, the audio. So we're just trying that because I think, as I mentioned, we want to create a robust record, and the audio thing did kind of work. We're just using like a cell phone recording, and it worked out pretty well.
Okay.
I mean, it eventually did.
Yes,
I don't have any questions on those, but I have two comments on that, on two committees, so.
okay,
One
so
is appropriate.
would you like to provide an update from TAC?
Sure, actually, I don't have an update from TAG. The TAG meeting is not scheduled until this
Thursday?
Thursday. It is this Thursday, but I committed to watching my granddaughter's Thursday, so I won't be able to make that. If somebody wants to attend in my place, that would be great. There's no.
There's no real business on this.
There's no action items on the minute, but we go and make a presentation.
Provide
So
an
if some-
update.
So if somebody wants to go, I mean, the only action item we really have is that we made a recommendation, for an appointee to the Board of Supervisors. So, there's no action items on their agenda other than filling a vacancy. So we can,
Would any
skip
board
this one
member
out.
like to attend to provide an update? Well,
I don't know.
I will do that then. I'll call in and provide them with that.
Oh, it's not, it's in person only.
It's in person only
Oh,
here,
it's here in this room.
so.
Yeah, that's right.
I can make the presentation the next meeting. I mean, as, if we skip a meeting, I would say, most of the groups that do presentations show up every 4 or 5 meetings.
Then let's have you just make the next meeting.
Right, well, I just want to make sure that was clear. And then I wanted to comment on TRF, really had to do with, Living the Dream, fundraiser. TRF helped out with that event. It was largely run by the rec department staff, but, incredibly impressive. The amount of money that was raised, the amount of work that goes into that event and how well it was organized and pulled off by the rec staff was, absolutely outstanding. They did a tremendous job. Melissa and her staff deserve to be recognized for that effort, and certainly financially they were. It was somebody paid $3,000 to get a ride on the fire truck. I mean, it was money was
The
just
generosity
flowing.
in this community is just outstanding, and that actually living the dreams, that fundraiser really reflects it.
Yeah.
So
It does. So
that was a huge success.
kudos to the rec staff.
I'll pass that along. It was a monumental success, certainly from a financial point of view. I mean, close to 70,000. I don't have final numbers yet. We have a couple of folks to collect from still. There was a monumental night. I don't, just keep in mind, because I don't want to create an expectation. We hadn't done this now for a couple of years. There might have been some extraordinary demand that we shouldn't, or contributions that we shouldn't expect year to year. The first year we did this about 5 years ago, six years ago, somewhere in there, was again another really big one, and then it dropped off. It still was a very successful event. Always more than 35,000 in net proceeds, but this will be the biggest ever. And it was pretty crazy, actually. It's just, it's kind of mind-boggling.
Okay, any other comments?
Always remember when Ian McPhee had said about fundraisers. He said they go like hotcakes, years 1 through 5, and then they take. That's been his experience, and he does more fundraisers than anybody in town, so anyway.
Okay. Any other comments regarding committee reports? Okay, moving on to the activity update. There is a utilities report in your packet. Any comments or questions on that?
I just have a real picky one. I can't tell the difference between the dark blue line and the lighter blue line on our water usage. Color.
Is it because of your computer?
Oh, maybe
Because of rain.
you're older than me.
On which graph are you speaking?
Well, I have the same problem, that's why I know.
You,
Which graph?
what's the
Oh,
title of
hold
it?
on, I just put it away. It's the one at the bottom that shows the 2013.
Is it the water conservation?
Yeah.
comparison?
Is it my computer?
Yeah, the lights are like blue, green, purple, and red.
Purple.
So I guess I have trouble between purple and blue on my computer. Okay,
Purple is the one that stops in September.
I have a problem with those 2 lines too, but I don't think it's the computer, but
thank you, Wayne.
they're welcome.
Wayne and Guy have agreed twice tonight.
That's right.
Any comments from the public on the utility reports? Okay, Directors' reports and or comments regarding any meetings attended on behalf of the district? None? Okay, then we'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everyone. And I have, it's 8:19.